It was 1984 in the United States, specifically late on the night of May 4th, just around 11 o'clock. A trio of teenagers was cruising down a lonely stretch known as Old Line Road. This was a desolate gravel track deep in Vernon County, Wisconsin, sitting west of Westby, surrounded by endless farmland and neighbors who lived miles apart. Traffic was practically non-existent out there after dark, so anything out of place on the shoulder was bound to catch your eye instantly. As they rolled through the dark, their headlights cut across the embankment and illuminated a strange silhouette. From a distance, it was just a blur, but as they eased off the gas and crept closer, that shapeless mass resolved into the figure of a grown woman. She didn't flinch as the car rolled up. She was completely still, showing zero signs of life. Spooked by the sight, the kids kept their distance, making sure not to lay a finger on her. They didn't rummage through her pockets or scour the ditch for an ID or personal items. Their gut instinct was to bolt and find help fast, so they sped to the nearest farmhouse to raise the alarm. Once they got to a phone, they dialed the authorities, but the drop site itself didn't offer any clues as to why she was there. Nobody just went for a casual stroll on Old Line Road, especially not in the dead of night. With zero shops, bars, or logical destinations nearby, there was no reason for a solitary woman to be out there. The witnesses told law enforcement they were totally clueless about her identity, nor did they know how she ended up in that ditch or how long she'd been lying there before they pulled up. When officers arrived and examined the victim, they were met with a gruesome sight. Her face had been completely obliterated. The victim was a Caucasian female, likely between 50 and 65, standing about 5'5" and tipping the scales at 150 pounds. She was distinctively undistinctive, no ink, no birthmarks, and completely stripped of any jewelry. She was dressed in a black garment featuring a blue and white print, worn over a light blue turtleneck. She also had on nylons, a 3/4 length coat, and a pair of simple brown slip-ons. Here's the kicker. Every single tag had been cut out of her clothes, a calculated move to stop detectives from tracking where the items were bought. Whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing, making it nearly impossible to track her down through her wardrobe. There was no handbag, no wallet, absolutely zero personal items found on or near her. Examiners discovered she had no real teeth left, relying entirely on a full set of upper and lower dentures. After sweeping the crime scene for clues, the body was sent to the morgue to pinpoint exactly how she died. The medical examiner's report was clear. The cause of death was massive blunt force trauma to the skull. The damage was catastrophic, focused entirely on her head and face, leaving her skull fractured in multiple places. Her jaw had been snapped in several spots, and one of her eye sockets was utterly pulverized. They also noted a sharp force injury near her left ear, though they couldn't identify the exact tool used to inflict it. The beating was so savage that her false teeth were knocked loose and broken, with pieces of the dental plate actually missing. But the horror didn't stop with the beating. In a gruesome twist, both of her hands had been hacked off at the wrists. Authorities launched a massive grid search of the vicinity, desperate to find the missing appendages. Despite their efforts, those hands were never found and remain missing to this day, though experts confirmed they were removed with a sharp blade. While the weapon remained a mystery, pathologists suspected the amputation happened peri-mortem, likely moments before she took her last breath. Since her hands were gone, there was no way to tell if she had fought back or had defensive wounds. The autopsy revealed no signs of sexual interference. Given the state of decomposition and other forensic markers, they estimated she had been killed roughly 24 to 48 hours before the teens found her. The violence was so extreme it rattled even seasoned detectives. They were hunting a monster. Chopping off the hands wasn't just sadism, it was a strategic move to eliminate fingerprints and hide her identity. The perpetrator went to extraordinary lengths to ensure this Jane Doe stayed nameless. Detectives realized the blood pooled at the scene didn't match the catastrophic head trauma, nor did it account for the massive bleeding you'd expect from a double amputation. The conclusion was obvious. She was murdered somewhere else and dumped on that gravel road like trash. Once the story hit the news, a local couple came forward with a tip about a strange run-in they had that exact night. Witnesses reported spotting a lone male standing next to a yellow compact coupe parked off US Highway 14, right near the Old Line Road junction. The subject seemed rattled when their headlights hit him. He scrambled back into the driver's seat and sped off into the night. At the moment, they chalked it up to just another odd roadside encounter and didn't give it a second thought. However, once the discovery of the corpse hit the news, the sickening realization set in. They had likely crossed paths with the killer. Feeling a moral obligation, the couple headed straight to the station and guided detectives back to that specific mile marker. Upon arrival, the crime scene unit identified fresh tread marks indicating a frantic, tight U-turn. The sweep of the area also produced critical physical evidence, specifically a men's watch and a broken piece of a denture plate. Forensics later matched that jagged dental shard perfectly to the damaged prosthetics worn by the victim. When you put the pieces together, the picture was clear. The witnesses had interrupted the murder in the middle of dumping the remains. Armed with this new lead, law enforcement immediately mobilized. The witnesses were dead certain about the vehicle, a canary yellow 1980s model Datsun. Police launched a massive manhunt for that specific car. Yet, despite burning through resources to track down the unique vehicle and its owner, the suspect remained a ghost. While the hunt for the car hit a wall, a separate team focused on the grim task of giving the victim back her name. Bulletins containing her dental records, physical stats, and clothing description went out to every law enforcement agency across the country. They also logged her profile into the national database for unidentified remains. Detectives pulled files on every missing woman in Wisconsin and neighboring territories, looking for any connection. They scrutinized dozens of potential candidates, but one by one, they were all ruled out. Ultimately, not a single missing person report matched the woman discovered on Old Line Road, leaving investigators with zero leads. As standard procedure in cases where the body offers no clues, authorities ordered a facial reconstruction to generate leads from the public. There was just one major hurdle. The victim's skull and facial bones had been obliterated. Before an artist could even pick up a pencil, anthropologists had to rebuild the bone structure from scratch, dealing with a caved-in cranium and shattered fragments. Experts had to analyze and place every single shard of bone with extreme precision. Through the work of some brilliant specialists, the skull was pieced back together, with the crushed sections lifted back to their approximate natural state. It was a delicate, high-stakes puzzle. One wrong move with the glue would completely distort the victim's final appearance. Once the bone structure was solid, scientists analyzed the biological markers to determine her tissue depth and profile. With the foundation set, a sketch artist stepped in to draft a composite of what she likely looked like in life. Police blasted the image out to the media, praying someone would recognize the face of this unknown woman, but the phone lines stayed silent. Nobody claimed her. With no name and no family, she was interred at the Viroqua City Cemetery as Vernon County Jane Doe. They designed the burial site specifically to allow for easy access later, anticipating that future forensic tech might crack the case. The investigation slowed to a crawl as weeks bled into months, and eventually, years. For decades, the file gathered dust, though it technically remained an active investigation. The evidence remained in lockup, and every so often, a new sheriff or detective would pull the box to take a fresh look. By 2015, authorities announced they had exhausted over 4,000 tips. At that point, she was one of only 2 unsolved murders in the whole county. That August, 2015, investigators decided to play their ace. They exhumed the body to harvest DNA for advanced lab work. Simultaneously, they ordered a modern, high-tech facial reconstruction, leveraging the latest in forensic anthropology and digital imaging software. They dropped the new image in late 2015, hoping the holiday season when families gather and talk would jog someone's memory. Interestingly, the lab also ran a pollen analysis on the fabric of the victim's clothes. The results were telling. The pollen signature pointed directly to the American Southwest, specifically Arizona or New Mexico. Armed with this geographic link, police widened their net, soliciting tips from the Southwest region alongside the local Midwest search. Yet again, the silence was deafening. It feels like there is enough evidence to solve this, but there is just one missing link keeping the truth out of reach. That void of information allowed amateur sleuths and locals to fill in the blanks with their own theories. The leading theory among them was the outsider dump scenario. In 2015, Sheriff John Spears noted that since the site was right off US Highway 14, a killer could easily commute from a big city, discard the body in rural Vernon County, and disappear. Old Line Road is so far off the grid, you don't even need a shovel to hide a dirty secret. The isolation does all the work for you. Maybe breaking ground wasn't an option. We might be looking at someone advanced in years, or perhaps dealing with a physical limitation that made manual labor impossible. Why bother with camouflage when the geography itself guarantees nobody's coming around to look? Still, severing the hands and cutting out clothing labels suggests a calculated mind, someone hell-bent on erasing any trail back to them. They knew the golden rule of getting away with murder. If the victim has no name, the case has no lead. This screams professional, or at least someone with a history of violence who wasn't fumbling through their first rodeo. Then again, flip the coin, and you might see a rookie in a blind panic, going to extreme grisly lengths just to feel safe. Was this a drifter passing through from the desert? Or, as another theory suggests, was it someone who knew these back roads like the back of their hand? You don't just end up on Old Line Road by accident. It's not a shortcut, and it's definitely not a sightseeing stop. That specific knowledge points a finger squarely at the local community. When Sheriff Spears pinned on the badge, he didn't just get a title. He inherited a pair of haunting mysteries, our Jane Doe and the 1985 murder of Terry Dolby. Detectives are convinced that Vernon County wasn't the killing floor for either woman, but merely the disposal site. Terry was a bright, 24-year-old college kid who vanished on Valentine's Day, 1985. One minute she was out walking her poodle, Susie, and the next, she was gone. It was completely out of character for someone so dependable, setting off alarm bells instantly. The search ended 4 days later, on February 18th, when a stranger stumbled across a nightmare in the countryside. There, on the shoulder of a lonely road, Terry's remains were found engulfed in flames. It was a scene of pure horror. She'd been beheaded, and the fire was a desperate, calculated attempt to incinerate any forensic clues. To make matters worse, neither her head nor her little white dog, Susie, were ever found. They simply vanished into thin air. Just like our Jane Doe, Terry had been murdered somewhere else before being discarded like trash on that roadside. Between the fire damage and the missing head, the coroner had a nearly impossible time pinpointing exactly how she died. The mystery hung over Vernon County like a dark cloud, frustrating detectives for decades. Justice finally began to turn its gears in September 2024 when police slapped cuffs on Michael Raymond Pop. He's facing a first-degree murder charge for Terry's slaying, though the gavel hasn't come down on a final verdict just yet. Naturally, people started whispering, could Pop be the monster behind our Jane Doe mystery too? Police haven't confirmed a link, so the rumor mill has shifted back to the most common suspect in these types of cases, the spouse. The brutality wasn't random. It felt intimate, fueled by the kind of rage you only see when the killer knows the victim. It wasn't just murder, it was an act of pure, unadulterated hatred. That level of venom suggests a partner, a husband, or someone who once shared a life with her. It also fits the profile of an older suspect, maybe a guy in his early 60s, who physically couldn't manage to dig a grave. Plus, obliterating her identity makes perfect sense if knowing her name leads the cops straight to his front door. The Vernon County Jane Doe story is nothing short of a heartbreak. It crushes the soul to think about how many people simply fade away, nameless, for years on end. Somewhere, a family is missing a piece of their heart, and until we find her name, this story has no ending. But there's hope that the rapid advances in forensic science will eventually break the silence. And finally, tell the world who she really was.